have a little bit of I don't know mind, because you have to leave space for what is new and what is truer forms of yourself, truer forms of what's possible. You have to leave space for that to come in. We're all trying to feel like we're doing it right. We're all trying to feel like we fit. We're all trying to feel like we belong. And we need to not let yoga be another place where we're have all this criticism. It's like, can this be a place where we can just like sink in and relax? Like, if you want to try to do it right, all the other areas of your life, like, let this be a place where there isn't any right. You know, the craving to drink, actually, I cannot believe it. I would have never believed it. And I remember people used to tell me, like, one day you're just not going to think about it. And I would be like, fuck off. Like, literally. Like, I was like, oh, really? You know, I was like, nah, not for me. Like, I'm going to think about this forever. We think we're so special or so different, but it just went away. It went away.
Hey, sober people and sober adjacent people. Welcome to I Have 12 Questions. I'm Amanda Patton, your host, a leading expert on nothing. However, I am in recovery and I love it so much so that I launched this podcast where we get to talk to people who are trudging the road to happy freaking destiny across all the different ways that people get there. So while this is definitely through the lens of recovery and sobriety, these stories and the themes that we'll be covering are universally human. So love, loss, grief, excitement, parenting, outside issues, purpose, God stuff, whatever. In the words of the great Ted Lasso by way of Walt Whitman, I want to be curious, not judgmental. So like I said, we'll be talking to people in recovery. We're going to be talking to experts and practitioners who help those people along their path in recovery. And we're just really excited to hear people tell their stories and to be inspired by them and to create a community of support for everybody in recovery and people who know and love people who struggle with addiction issues and whatnot. So anyways, we're so glad you're here and thanks for listening. Hey listeners, just a quick disclaimer before we get into the interview. The views and opinions expressed by those interviewed on I Have 12 Questions or myself are just opinions and our own personal experiences. We are not doctors or therapists or psychiatrists. So none of the recommendations or opinions expressed should be considered medical or psychological advice. There may be adult language contained in some of these episodes, as well as triggers around conversations regarding rape, sexual abuse, drug and alcohol usage, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and many other topics that will come up when we are discussing addiction and recovery from addiction. So please use discretion. This podcast is not for everybody. Thank you. Hey, sober family and our entire listener community. So we have a really great show for you guys today. And our guest is Cole Chance. And for those of you who don't know, let me catch you up real quick. So she's an international yoga teacher and a recovery educator. And she's joining us actually from Bali. Bali. It's Bali, right?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Bali is like a fitness thing. From Bali, where she's running retreats. And we have had a really fun time scheduling around the 14-hour time difference. So like that's been super fun. I was like doing the math on it. It's pretty interesting. But she's a trauma-informed yoga teacher and addiction recovery educator, teaching in many capacities from retreats to trainings, festivals, and prisons. And she truly believes in the medicine and movement and the power of curiosity, the wisdom found in community, which we definitely know a lot about being in recovery. So her teaching fuse embodied flow, breath, neuroscience, yogic, and Buddhist philosophies swirled up with compassionate self-inquiry. That's like a word hug, you know? It's just, you're just like, so today, Cole, we're going to talk to you about your recovery support offering. It's called Emerge Recovery. It is a live online journey to recovery steeped in love, acceptance, and empowerment. We're going to get into that here in a little bit. And then, of course, your yoga instruction to me was delicious and comforting. And, you know, I'm not going to say I suck at yoga because I don't want to say mean things to myself, but like, I'm not really that good at it. And it's not really my thing. Or it wasn't, just because it seemed out of my reach somehow. And I've always been more into like running and CrossFit and like hardcore fast, torturous things as opposed to these like nurturing, slow type of deals. So, and I used to think it was kind of boring to have to sit there and be still. But when I started doing your yoga videos, it was just totally different. And when I went to your yoga and writing retreat in late 2021, it was just a really special approach. It was fun. It was funny. It was lighthearted. And you could tell it was based on self-love and perpetual discovery. So, and I felt comfortable, and I also felt like I didn't need to be good at it, So anyways, I have so much to say about you before I've even introduced you, but I did want to just plug all your stuff and make sure that people know you can check out all of her, offerings at colechanceyoga.com or on Instagram at colechanceyoga. And I've even tried out a few sessions too on YouTube. And, I did one this morning. You were in a cave in Sicily, and it said it came with a gong boy. And then I saw Josh walk over there. I was like,
I love that one. I love it.
I was like, wait, it came with a gong boy? And then he walked up and I was like, oh my God. It was funny. But there's sessions on there, and you can also try on CCY Studio, which is Cole Chance Yoga, on her website. Gives you access to curated premium content, Asana Lab library, longer sessions, and then you can get early access to like retreats and, a bunch of other cool stuff. So definitely check that out. And then of course the Mindfulish School, which is rebellious yoga teacher training, which I love. And also the resources page is just brimming. I mean, I thought I was pretty well read in recovery literature, but there are things on there that I hadn't heard of, and I'm super excited. So definitely want to encourage our listeners to go check out the resources page on her website, and check out it's books, it's meetings, it's all kinds of things. So anyways, I've asked Cole here today to share her story, about getting clean and sober, and also just all the beautiful, difficult things that she's had to go through, to get to where she is today. So Cole, officially welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah. It's so hectic to me down because my time zone changes often. But yeah, we did it. We made it work. Here we are.
We made it work. You ran out of gas on your motorbike on the way over and had to pop over. It's just such an exciting life. I could hear the activity in the background, and you're in Bali and it's like morning time. I'm sure it's beautiful there. It's kind of that dream life that I think everybody's like, wow. I'm sure it's really hard work too, but also it can't suck getting to go to all those beautiful places. So, okay. I'm going to start with Huh?
I was just going to say it doesn't suck. It's funny that all these things still happen regardless of where you are. It's just like a different scenario. And absolutely though happening in a dream. This was my dream way back before I was able to realize it back in, I used to read like travel memoirs with like one eye open because, I was so drunk and I'm like trying to keep the line straight. And I just wanted to travel so much. And now I'm doing it. So.
That is so awesome.
Yes.
Like that's, wow. Okay. Let's start with an icebreaker. So if yoga were like a competitive sport, let's say, what would your stage name or character name be? And would you have a theme song?
Oh man. It's funny because I'm actually quite competitive. Whenever I first started yoga, I really wanted to like beat the teacher. It's like, I am really competitive. I come from that background. But so yoga's been really good for me to unwind that. But I think just because I'm watching like Vikings, like a crazy woman right now, I'm so into Vikings. I'd probably be like I'd be like the shield maiden yogi. That's what I like to see myself as. I'd be some sort of like a shield maiden yogini, something like that. Have you watched Vikings?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. And just some epic Viking Norse music in the background. And I'd be super fierce and like probably have some blood spattered all over me. There we go. How's that?
I love it. I love that. It's very opposite of yogic, but also very warrior. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Well, actually,
because
we have a little bit of a lag. So sorry about that to the listener.
Sorry. That's okay.
I was going to say that in Hindu mythology, though, like Kali is the fierce warrior goddess, and she wears like a string of heads around her waist. She has a waistband of heads, and she is like the fierce protector. And they're all of this is actually in all the mythology, in the yogic mythology. So it actually does go in.
Okay.
It does. It's archetype and story, and it's really fascinating. The mythology is quite violent in ways, but talking about, battling our inner demons, but it's personified with blood and heads and limbs, and it's pretty fierce.
I kind of love that, and I did not know that. It's really sad because I've experienced a lot of the westernized version of yoga, going to studios and stuff like that, where a lot of that doesn't get but also as peaceful as yoga is, and how relaxing for me, it's also, and for a lot of people, when you're on the mat, you cry unexplainably, or a lot of maybe triggers come up or memory. I don't know. It just seems to unearth a lot of, I don't want to say violent internal dialogue, but maybe there's something to that. Okay. All right. So you're one of the most laid back people I've ever been around. When I was trying to write a sentence or something about like kind of what you feel like in person, I wrote, you feel like a nap in a hammock with a great book in the springtime sun, but like under a shade tree, it's like, it's just peaceful, and it's not fake peaceful. It's like legitimately peaceful. And I want to know how you maintain that. I mean, how do you maintain that place mentally?
Well, I don't. I come and go from there. I can't, I'm not always like that, though. I feel like I'm probably have more of a through line than I realize sometimes, but I often feel I can definitely get quite frustrated and agitated, and I move forward in my life a lot. Like I feel like there's a sense of urgency often when I get really busy. So I have to pull myself back. So it's kind of a recalibration, but I think that's with everyone. We're meant to be flexible and to change. I think a lot of times my baseline when I'm not too busy, my baseline when I'm not feeling urgent or stressed is pretty chill. And I even do bring this kind of attitude. I like to think I bring this attitude of like laid backness, even when I am feeling urgent, but I do think I have a baseline of that. I just don't always stay there. We don't always meant to stay at our baseline, but
right.
Perspective. I try to keep things in perspective, and I don't always. I get real zoomed in, and then I'll zoom back out, and it's just kind of a little bit of a practice of keeping things in perspective. Yeah,
I like your honesty too about like, I'm not always like that, or you probably have a lot of practice. You do have a lot of practices in your life that help you to, stay calm on the outside, even when you may be feeling rushed internally. But like even in your classes and stuff, you like make these noises like, it's just very, like you're in the moment, like you're just so present, and it makes everyone else feel so present. And you're not trying to like be perfect or expect other people to be perfect in their poses. It's more just like this very comfortable, laid back, type of thing. And I'm so competitive. Like you were saying that, like, it's hard for me to just really lose myself in a moment because I'm thinking about like, am I doing it right? Did she change position? Like, it's that kind of thing. But you just seem totally opposite of that. So, okay. So I know you've written a lot about this. There's a lot online about your story, and you've been on a bunch of podcasts. So I know it's out in the world, but can you kind of walk us back through what it was like, the parts that you want to share, in your active addiction?
Yeah. I had many different phases. I mean, it wasn't short-lived. So I had many different phases. I think in the beginning it was exciting. I did it because it was exciting. I felt in the very beginning, I felt like I had finally like filled myself out, or like one way I put it, like I didn't know that my life was in black and white. until it was in Technicolor, kind of like Wizard of Oz. Like I didn't even know that it was in black and white.
Right.
And I just felt like I was more of myself. I was like really embodied, which is that's the fucking paradox of this whole thing, is that I really felt like I was like me. I'm like me. And it felt delicious. And it was incredibly seductive. And what's more seductive than like really feeling like you are yourself in the world, uninhibited and powerful. That's what it felt like. So I was going to do anything that I needed to do to continue that. I thought I'd found the golden ticket. Like, why is anybody doing anything except drinking? Because this is incredible. Like, really? Like, wow. And seriously, that's my mentality. I didn't. Yeah. So for a long time, it was that. And then later on, it was trying to get back to that. And then it was, fewer and far between. I don't know if you've seen there's a little animation. It's only like 5 minutes and it's called Nuggets. Look it up. And yeah, anyone who's listening, Nuggets, it's 5 minutes.
Okay.
And it's an animated journey. It's like an animated journey of addiction. And it's like this little bird. It's really simple. It's a really simple animation, but he goes and he sees like a little golden nugget and he sucks it up through his beak. And then he goes, woo! And he like flies and there's like, he's up in the sky and it's excellent. And then he like finally lands back down. He lands really softly and then he keeps walking and then he sees another nugget and he continues to get these nuggets up. But every time he sucks up a nugget, he just goes a little bit lower. It's not quite as high. And then he starts kind of like bouncing when he hits the ground. And then he like splat when he hits the ground. And then the next time he hits the ground, he like makes a divot and then he like can't get himself back up. And I'm like, oh my God. That is what it was. He just wants to get back to what this was like, and he can't. And you can't go back to what it was like. And in my personal journey, of course, I had social anxiety. I had some things going on that I was getting away from. But for the most part, I felt like I was moving towards something, like I was getting big in it. It was a lot of sensory input, and it's not possible for that to continue at that level. And my tolerance got so high that I almost killed myself trying. Yeah, just due to that. So that was that's a really kind of a zoomed out version of that. But I went through many different phases with it. Ultimately, I was in and out of. I started going to treatment, I think, when I was 21 or 22, which felt way too early for me to get sober. Like, no, I just wasn't doing it right. So I would end up going in, but I never really wanted to get sober. I just wanted to figure out how to do it right. That was my obsession because I knew how good it felt. And I just needed to crack the code. I just needed to do it right. So I would go to treatment whenever I'd be like, I'd hit a wall and I'd be broken. Something chaotic would happen. My addiction was very colorful, to say the least. And, but I didn't really go in to get sober. I went in to because I was in enough pain to do it in the beginning. But right when I started feeling better, I never planned on getting sober. I was just like plotting, really. I was strategizing how I was going to, drink differently or, not mix cocaine and Xanax or not, all these little things. Or I needed to move or I needed to break up with the guy or, it was all of these things that needed to happen. That was causing this chaos. So I moved a lot. I lived in resort towns a lot. It was really easy to hide. I bartended. I lived in party places. I lived in ski resorts where everybody woke up and had a Bloody Mary in the morning. So it was really easy. I could drink at work. I could drink at not work. But I would also drink around friends. And then I would start needing to hide bottles of wine as well. So I'd have to have a bottle. I'd have to drink in the closet and then drink at the party. Or I started having to supplement. I'd have to hide morning drinking sometimes, depending on where I was or who I was with. So that started getting a little bit more hectic because then that's a little bit harder to hide from yourself. Prior, it was easier to hide from myself when I was just doing it and everybody else was doing it. I was in a big party environment. Like I was always in a big party environment. Like,
right.
So for me to need to hide my consumption in a raging party environment was a bit
That's when
telling,
you know,
but
something's wrong.
I wasn't listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
So in the end, feel free to stop me and ask me any questions. I'm just kind of rambling here, but started to get harder and harder to think that I was having fun, even though I took it all the way to the end. I took it all the way to the end, the delusion that I was having fun, even though it was getting harder and harder to believe that, because then I'm like in and out of detoxes. I'm in and out of hospitals. I'm getting arrested for things. I try to check into detox, but then I have to leave because I'm shaking too bad, or I had a grand mal seizure and I'm in a hospital for a week. Like all of these things. And I'm saying it's stress, it's whatever. I'm just like making all this shit up. And everybody's like, everybody knows. And everybody's just waiting for me to actually just kind of waiting for me to die, really. My mom said that in the end, she just, every time the phone rang, she was just like, that was it. That was the last, that was going to be the call. And, I was really, really bad, really, really bad in the end. I had like checked myself out of detox with this like beautiful Lebanese man who was a heroin addict. And
nice.
Yeah. And we walked down the train tracks, and I still remember it was like such a love story, like how dramatic it was. They check us out of rehab. Nobody wants us to go. There's people everywhere. Our families are calling. Everyone's like, no, don't go. And I always had this idea of myself that I was like in a movie. I could kind of see myself out of a bird's eye view a little bit. I was like, oh, this is a great story. Like, this is a really good script. And we check ourselves out, and, you know, to everyone freaking out. And they're telling me that he's dangerous. He's dangerous. Like, do not leave with him. He's schizophrenic. Da, 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 da. And we're walking down these train tracks because we have to walk back into Austin. We're like 15 minutes out of Austin, middle of summer. And we're walking to the closest liquor store. And I'm like, do you know what they tried to tell me about you? And like, they're trying to tell me, they were telling my family, and they were telling me that you were dangerous and that you're schizophrenic. And he was like, well, I am. And I was like, oh, we can work with this. We can work with this, babe. So I kind of like live in and out of like hotels for the next while. And so this last 3 months, I hadn't done intravenous heroin until these last 3 months. And I started shooting heroin in the end, and ended up at some crack houses in East Austin. And like, it was just trailer prostitution. I mean, it was just hectic. Like, I started doing cocaine in like smoking crack. We called it smoking cocaine, but in like yachts and big, beautiful houses. And then, you know, to be at a crack house in like a trailer with no wheels on it, it was quite different. It was quite different. And so this is what I mean in terms of getting really harder for me to tell myself that I was choosing this, that I was having fun. This is what I wanted to do. In the end, I overdosed, thankfully. Everybody left. That's what happens. Nobody wants to get in trouble. Like, fair enough. And whenever I kind of came to, I had to hitchhike across Austin in the middle of summer, and I like had to like frog across I-35, and I had like, I couldn't turn my head because my head was vibrating. Like, I mean, it was not normal. And I was trying, I couldn't, in order to cross the street, I had to turn my whole body really, really slowly to see if a car was coming, and then like look back to the street. I don't know how I made it across, like how I didn't get hit, but I did. And I finally make it back to this room I had rented that was across from a liquor store this old Mexican man I had like rented this room from. It was a sketchy little thing. And I bought a bunch of booze, and I think I had some pills, and I was going to like nurse myself back to health, because this is what I did, back to health. Mm-hmm. And I remember drinking, and nothing was happening. there was like no semblance of this being a tonic at all. Nothing was helping. And I like take some Xanax and like nothing is helping because I don't have a hangover. Like I've just been like, my brain's just been electrocuted and I'm like withdrawing like a freaking maniac. And I can't figure out why it's not working. And I remember I had just got out of like a 3-month treatment a few months prior. And I remember somebody telling me in there, I like legitimately asked somebody, again, I wasn't really wanting to get sober, but I legitimately asked somebody who worked there, like, how the fuck did you do it? Like, how did you, why did you, get sober? And what she told me was that, one day I was like one of the only persons in there. I didn't want to be there. Most people wanted to be there. I did not want to be there. So this is, the different attitude. She goes, one day you're going to realize that you can be high or you can be happy. And even though they used to go together, it's never going to work again. And then you'll be done. And that just like went right over my head. Like, yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah. And that day when I'm sitting in that fucking little room and I'm doing everything, the only thing I know how to make myself feel better, I remember her saying that. And I also remember like in AA, they used to say something like, one day it's just not going to work anymore. And I thought that day that they meant like one day, and they did mean one day, like the drugs and the alcohol aren't going to work anymore. But I took it that day to mean like actually the substance wasn't going to work anymore. Like it actually just like lost its power because I put so much power on this thing. And I was just thinking like, today's the day. It's not going to work anymore. And those two thoughts combined, like I had both of those voices pop back into my head in this like moment of clarity. And then I was like, I'm done. Because I didn't start this thing I wasn't on a death mission. And some people are. Some people are on a different journey and a different intention. But my intention was to be in my life, to be big in my life and to feel. And it just wasn't working anymore. And I called a sober living place that I had been kicked out of prior because I was hiding booze all over the house and forgetting where I left it, endangering everybody else that was there. And they shouldn't have let me back in. There's one place in Austin that takes people who don't come out of a treatment center. Normally to get into sober living, you have to come out of treatment. There's one place called the Grace Houses. They have 5 of them in Austin. And one of those houses will take a high risk person. And that's someone who came not out of treatment. And then one of those rooms in this house was open for people who didn't have any money. And they had no reason to give me that room back because I just put everybody at risk. And they did, because the lady who works there is a friend of mine. But she said, I had never heard you actually want help. And I called her that day and I was like, please, I don't even know what I said. I don't even remember what I said, but I like pleaded to her. And she said, I have a bet on Wednesday. And it was like 3 days away. I'm like, fuck, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I'm like living across from a liquor store. And I think I probably drank until then. I didn't go in there. I didn't go in there completely sober, but I went in there like functionally sober. But I showed up on a Tuesday night with my stuff and I said, I'll sleep on your couch. And that I walked in the door. That was it. That was the end.
Wow.
Yeah.
Golly,
and walking in the door, that like threshold. Like I really love that word, that threshold. We think of it as a doorway, but really like what it actually means, threshing, is to take like wheat or something. And it's when they shake the wheat and they slam it and they hit it and they separate the edible from the inedible. They separate what they can eat from what they can't eat. And that's actually what threshing is, to separate something.
Wow.
And it so felt like when I walked in that door, it was like I just like unwound, because outside did not feel safe to me. I did not trust myself. Like there's no reason I should have trusted myself. Like I was like a walking liability. My friend actually has a tattoo of me. I was just talking about this last night. He actually has a time bomb. That was my nickname. He actually has a tattoo of a bomb on his arm because you never knew what was going to happen. And like, that's what I felt like. I felt like a walking time bomb. And when I walked in that door, it was this allowance to be who I was, and everybody else was struggling in there. And I didn't want to fucking be there, but I didn't have to be anything other than struggling and trying.
Yeah.
And it saved my life.
That's insane. That is a crazy, awesome story. And that's so weird to me that, and I've heard this from so many people, and I don't know if it's the universe or what or why or whatever, but like for some reason, when we're like in the pits in one of those moments, these random fucking phrases come back, or something flies into your head that somebody said 5 years ago, or that I had rolled my eyes at, or that I was like, okay, cool, thanks. You know, like what? And then we just have this knowing that we're done, even though we've been done. For me, I'd been done many, many times before. I couldn't stay done. But that last time I just knew it was over. I knew it was over. And I don't know why or any of that, but I had phrases come in too. And you called it a moment of clarity, which was weird because I was not in a good space. Like I was not okay. But I did have this moment of clarity, and the fact that, you know, you were allowed in, right? And just all these things had to happen, but you also had to be ready. And oh my gosh, I didn't know your whole story. Like I know bits and pieces from things and, you know, things I've read and stuff like that, but I never knew the whole thing. And also the way you talk about how it morphs, you know, and how we still keep convincing ourselves that like, this is fun, I'm having fun, right? And then the circumstances get so shitty at the end that you can't, you know, and or the chemicals stop working. Oh my gosh. Okay. That was a lot. Okay. I'm going to read this from your website really quickly. So when you're talking about emerge recovery, the website says, when it comes to addiction, it's never just the thing. It's grief and trauma and patterns and past experiences and relationships and shame all bundled up together. It's a cycle of promising you'll change and punishing yourself when you don't. Feeling out of control but not knowing how to grab the reins. Sometimes it's meeting rock bottom. But there's one thing it's not. It's not you, because you are not your addiction. And that means you are the one who gets to draw the line in the sand. You are the one who has the power to create lasting change. So what are the tenets of emerge recovery? You know, just how does it work? What is it? You know, I'm sure you could talk for hours about it, but give us a, you know, overview.
Yeah. The way that I think it's really important, you know, just like what you just read, that we realize that we're not our addiction. So that allows us to actually be empowered. That allows us to do something. But it's really important to know also that we can't do it alone. That's just not the way that humans work. Like we have to do it together. And I created this program, Emerge, to be a support container for that. I have been in and out of AA. I have been in and out of numerous treatments and IOPs and detoxes and all of these different things. And I always felt like I was trying to fit in the box. And that's what a lot of people say. It's like, this works or it doesn't work. That's what you got. This is going to work for you or you don't work. It doesn't work. And this won't work. And I really remember, you know, back in the day, AA was really challenging for me, but anything would have been challenging for me. So I want to like make that really clear, that nothing was going to work because I wasn't going to let it work. So not saying that like Emerge could have popped in and like done this for me because I wasn't ready. But I remember something in the big book, and there's a piece in there that is talking about that this program works. And it says, but there are such unfortunates, and they are incapable of being completely honest with themselves. So essentially saying that if this works, except for these few people that are just unfortunate. And I'm like, meh. And that is really hard. And other people remember that part of the book, because like if you feel like this isn't working for me, and then you're like, oh yeah, You already think that you are outcast from society. You already think that you already are separate from everything. And then that part of the book, you're just like, yeah, of course. And like that you're in or you're out kind of mentality is really damaging. And I think that there's so much good thing about AA. And actually, like, I've reconciled my relationship with it once I could see from a different perspective. But at the time that was really challenging. So I really wanted to create this program that I don't know what's going to work. I have no clue what your formula is or what your code is or what your, your unique combination lock is. But here are some really supportive things, and take what works and leave the rest. That's the thing. And what it's compiled of are things that have helped me. I don't expect them to work on you the way that they have worked on me, but they may. So stay curious. Yeah. And Buddhism is a big piece of it. Buddhism and neuroscience both are a really big piece of it. Both of these really humanize the human condition. It's like, oh, you suffer? Okay, you're human. Oh, you get angry sometimes? Okay, you're human. Oh, you want things? Yeah. Number one thing about being a human is that we want, we crave, we desire. So this stuff has been talked about for thousands and thousands of years. And we're wired with these ancient nervous systems that have been wired this way for way more than thousands of years. So to look at it that way really depersonalizes this, I'm a fucking addict. Like, there's something wrong with me. It's like your pain is not personal. It's unique, but it's not because you've done something wrong. It's not moral. You're not being punished. You're just being human is hard. And so both of those things really were supportive. One from more of a spiritual side, and the other one, it's like, oh, this is what happens in your body. This is what is happening when I drink. This is what my dopamine system looks like. And when I get limbic hijack, and like, how could I not do this when this is what's happening? Yeah. So that just humanizes and normalizes it. And that is a really big piece. And we also bring in lots of different, like, modern psychology. I love internal family systems, which is in a nutshell of not having one internal self. There's not this one thing. And then I act, there's all these, I have one solid thing. It's like, no, we have different parts of ourselves. And I have part of me that really wants to drink. And I have a part of me that really wants to get sober. And I have a part of me that's just scared about the whole thing. And then I have another part that's just trying to fix it all. And to understand that component as well, and to know that all the parts are like just trying to do what's best for us, and they're just don't know how, that's really, really powerful. When we look at attachment theory, we look at polyvagal theory, which is like figuring out what our nervous system wants and needs and why it acts the way that it acts. Yoga, to create practices that bring us into connection with our body, because addiction separates us. So finding ways to soothe our system without needing to reach for a bottle. It's a modge podge of different things. Jack brings in some Ayurveda, which is another lens to look at ourselves through. Like, what is my nature? What are my tendencies? She also brings in like some mantra and some mudra, which are just like different practices to bring in intention. And again, some things aren't going to resonate, and other things you're like, holy shit, that.
Yeah.
And that is, that's the gist of it. And it's just a stellar program. And it's been really supportive, and it's my favorite thing that I do. And I do lots of things.
And it's like the Sangha piece too, right? That community, that togetherness and supporting each other. And, but when you were talking about IFS, that's crazy, because that's what I've used with my therapist for years. That's with the firefighter, the exile, the manager, right? And I always just pushed the parts away that were frustrating me or making me feel uncomfortable, instead of saying, come on in. Like, what are you trying to show me? What are you trying to protect me from? Because like you said, really everybody's working together in there to try to help me. But sometimes one part would take over, but I didn't know any of that. I didn't understand. I was just doing, what I did. And I remember when I was first going, oh my God, I have a problem. I have a problem with drinking and cocaine and Xanax and Adderall. Like, this has all become a weird science experiment, and it is not working anymore. The whole goal was to like not feel. And now I have to take so much to not feel that I don't even get high anymore. So like, I don't even know what the point is and blah, blah, blah. But my thing was, if I learn about it, then I won't do it anymore. So if I learn, and so I went into study research mode of like, oh, it takes my brain 12 weeks to replace all my dopamine and serotonin after I do cocaine. So like, so I shouldn't do it. Right. I was like, self-knowledge, I will understand all of this and then it will make me not want to do it. And no, the first time something was in front of me, the next time I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing that. But you have to, like, in your work talks a lot about this too, of having to, it's a lived experience. Like you almost have to live it and experience it. And each person does that in a very unique way. So it makes sense that what's going to help them change those patterns is going to also be very unique. But it's a combination of proven things, neuroscience, Buddhism, like things that obviously have worked and that you can, not like it's a buffet, but you can put it together the way that it's going to work for you. One of my questions that I had on here, which you already kind of touched on it, but it was, did you ever try AA or Recovery Dharma or any of the other more established, kind of old school programs, and what didn't work or maybe was missing for you? And I think you touched, you explained that. And that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, because some things just don't resonate. And I don't want someone who is looking for help to walk into AA and go back out because that didn't resonate, because nowadays anyways, there's so many, options. But was there anything else that because people have a lot of issues with AA, myself included. I have a lot of issues with the literature. There's a lot of stuff, but I was so desperate when I got sober that I would have done anything because I was scared I was going to die. And I've evolved over the past 9 years that I've been in recovery, and I've needed and I've pulled in all kinds of other Buddhism has been a huge part of it. Neuroscience, therapy, CBT stuff, EMDR, whatever, all kinds of other things, but also Recovery Dharma or Refuge Recovery, just where the language was less Christian-y or less sexist or less 1930s. You know what I'm saying? So like the steps and the traditions, like it helped me. It saved my life. I still go to traditional and secular AA meetings. So like, I'm not trying to knock it at all, but I have outgrown a lot of those things. And so was there anything else that stuck out to you about other things that you had tried that was missing? Because I'm sure maybe Emerge now is that, right? Let me scan the environment and let me go create something together with all the things that we're missing.
Well, I think that what I was trying to do was trying to create like an umbrella of something to get the people who didn't fall under this like umbrella, because there's a lot of people out in the rain. So that's kind of where this all came in. But I really resonated. Well, I remember going to like the Zen Center in Austin.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They have great meetings there too.
Yeah. And so I was always leaning towards the Buddhism a little bit. So Refuge Recovery, I really like, and I've done a retreat with Refuge Recovery, which was awesome. Meditation retreat, which was great. So I really resonate with them. But that's really about it. So AA, I was in and out of AA for, a decade. Probably not a decade. I think I went to my first AA meeting probably when I was like 24. So I was in and out since then. And it's so different. Really wanted to encourage people that it's depending. It's so different. If you don't like one meeting, don't write it off. Go somewhere else. Yeah. It's also dependent on the people and the culture. Each meeting culture.
Totally. It's like a franchise. Like every situation you walk into is completely different depending on who you're with, where you are. And, I started going to women's meetings only. I started going to more secular AA because I was so over the dogma stuff and whatever. But I've always resonated more with Buddhism than I do with Christianity or any other belief system. And to me, it doesn't even feel like a religion. It feels like a philosophy. I like the guidelines and it makes sense to me. It feels peaceful. Whereas because of the way I was raised, sometimes things steeped in Christianity or dogma or this monotheistic approach makes me feel very nervous and judged and protective and triggered. And I don't want to feel like that when I'm trying to be peaceful and sober and stuff. So, okay, good. It's good to know. I like to hear people's experiences with different things that they tried. When was the last time you thought about drinking or using, or you had a resentment or maybe a traumatic memory, just one of those zingers, those moments where it hits you, whatever it is. And kind of how do you work through that? If that even happens for you anymore, I don't know.
Well, I definitely have resentments come up about stuff for sure. I'm definitely not resentment free. But, the craving to drink, actually, I cannot believe it. I would have never believed it. And I remember people used to tell me, like, one day you're just not going to think about it. And I would be like, fuck off. Like, literally. Like, I was like, oh, really? I was like, no, not for me. Like, I'm going to think about this forever. We think we're so special. We're so different. But it just went away. It went away. And a big thing of it for me is that I think I mentioned earlier, it's like I always wanted to travel ever since I was a little girl. I was born in Oklahoma. I lived in a town of like 200 people, and I wanted to be a dolphin trainer, and I wanted to travel the world. Like, it was kind of tragic. So I always wanted this like big life and wanted to like go big places. And I wasn't going anywhere. I was just like at the bottom of the bottle all the time. So very quickly after I got sober, I started traveling. Some things just like clicked into place, and I got asked to do this and then asked to do this and then yoga. And then I was teaching, and I kind of got thrown into all of a sudden. I'm like, this is the other option. Like, this is what I can be doing. Keep it. So
what is regret?
This would have been.
Like, you're doing it. You're doing it. You're doing the thing that you want. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Where I live now. I live in Australia, and about 15 minutes from the coast, and they're freaking pods of dolphins swimming whenever we go surfing. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, my little girl's out there just like so excited.
That's incredible.
But I know that I feel very fortunate for the way that all of that went. And I know that is not common. Like in the beginning, when I first got sober, I found a job as a waitress to a place who I hated working there, but they hired people that were just coming out of treatment. Like, it was something that was known. Had I had to stay in that job for 5 years and maybe had a couple kids and my partner was gone, that would have been a totally different thing. Like, I just want to really just speak my privilege there, that I didn't have anything when I got sober, but I didn't have to deal with a lot of mental health issues. I did have family that was like paying for my sober living, and I didn't have dependents. So you had
freedom to go pursue. Yeah. Yeah, but you had to put yourself in that position by getting sober first, otherwise, right?
Totally.
Like,
but I'm not just saying like just go travel the world. Yeah,
totally
different. It's a different thing. But the craving did just go away, and the most thing that comes up for me now, and it's not a craving, it's a thought. And sometimes, like, I'll see a glass of wine or something, and I'm like, there is no barrier. I could go and pick that up and just drink it, and it would rock my world. Like, it would change. I don't know what would happen. And it actually feels so innocuous that it's just sitting there in a glass, and I could just pick it up. So sometimes I'll have this weird thought. It's not like a craving to do it. It's just the thing, like that thing that will ruin my life. It's just there. It's just around. Like, it feels so innocuous in a way. And sometimes I'll think like, am I never going to have a glass of wine again? And that feels just weird, but it's not a grief and it's not a sadness. It's just like a weird thought.
It's weird,
but it's not a craving.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong if you have cravings either.
No.
It's just, that's my truth with it. Is that I'm like,
people are
that bottle, no one would slap it out of my hand. Like,
And that's weird. And I've had those thoughts too, where I see, somebody left like half a beer on a table, or I think of like a 12-ounce bottle of beer could literally ruin my life. It's just sitting there minding its own business. But if I decided to pick it up and put it into my body, like that little thing has the power to absolutely wreck my life, because I don't know what's going to happen after I put that first one, which is it's so weird and bizarre, and something I used to center my life around. Now I hardly ever think about. But when I am in a tough spot, it doesn't happen very often because my life is so full. My life is so full and I just don't think about it. But when I'm super happy and or excited, sometimes I'll have a fleeting thought. If I see people patio drinking on the lake or whatever, I'll have a little fleeting thought of like, man, those were the good old days on Lake Travis. Like, some fun shit went down, right? But it's like the highlight reel. I get honest with myself, whatever. Or when I'm really scared, fearful, or sad. We lost my dad to cancer at the end of September, and it was horrible. And we watched him suffer, and grieving sober is something I've never done before. And so I'm like, yeah, fuck this. This is horrible and it hurts. And how long is this going to last? Like, when is it over? Right. It's only been 5 months, but like, of course I'm like, are we done yet? And feeling like a newcomer, feeling very unsteady. And so I'm not going to say I haven't had cravings, but I have had that voice that's like, you know what? You don't have to feel sad right now if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. There's something that will make it go away. Right. And I know to call bullshit on that voice. I know exactly what that is, but it's weird because that just doesn't happen, anymore. Because it's rare that I want to change how I feel. But lately I have wanted to change how I feel. I want to escape. I'm tired of being sad, So it's really weird, but it's like you're saying, it's not a craving. It's not an obsession. It doesn't like hijack my entire freaking day and mind and everything. Actually, it scares me. I'm like, whoa, I see you.
I think it is. I think it is really something to pay attention to. Like, it's not like a physical craving, but those voices, it is something to kind of, I don't know if it's just something to be curious about, I suppose.
Yeah. To ask questions, be like, what's going on with that? Because, I'm an adult woman. I live alone. I can go pick up alcohol whenever I feel like it. No one's stopping me. And that's scary. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, who let me out of the cage? You know what I'm saying? Because I remember how I used to be, but I'm not that person anymore. So, okay.
One more thing I want to say real quick before we move on is that one thing that comes up for me that I was just curious if it comes up for you, and this kind of scares me, when sometimes I think I've made it up or that I'm exaggerating it. Sometimes there's a part of me that's like, was it really that bad? Like, are you exaggerating? And I'm always like, I have to really check myself when that comes up. It's like a form of nostalgia is really a little bit of a delusion. So this delusion part comes up and it's like, you're an adult. Like, is it, you really like, that really happened? Like, exaggerating it a little bit? Like, no.
Yeah, it's weird. I've definitely had those thoughts too of like, I probably overreacted. I'm probably actually not an alcoholic, or you were going through a rough patch. You just did what you needed to do to get through and you're better now. You're healthier now. You've done all this therapy. You've done all this program. Like, you know what your limits are, right? It's that whole conversation. And I do have to check myself too of like, because anytime somebody, I don't know, I can't speak for other people. I can just speak for myself. And I never drink for fun. I never drink socially. I drink to check out. And when I drink, I want other things to go with it and I will get it. And so that turns into a whole other being awake for 4 days type of deal. So yeah, I never was like, I want to have a beer with dinner. Like, I don't even understand that. But it's good to talk about it out loud and to just say like, yeah, it happens. And the thought and the action don't have to be the same anymore. And for me, they were. If I had a thought, I did it. It was like, there was no separating the thought and the action. which, you know, when you have space, when you have time from it, it's weird to look back and think that it was so dominating, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a gift to not be obsessed all the time with that. So when I've been in your yoga classes, whether they were online or in person or whatever, I noticed something very different, and it's comfortable. It's approachable. It feels very spacious, and like irreverent in terms of like not needing to follow rules or expected, you know, this, that, and the other. And like one of your sessions is called Morning Wiggles. And there's this coffee cup yoga one. I don't know. It's just, it's fun. It's creative. It's lighthearted, but it's a different level of self-care and self-expression. So like, how did you develop this very cool style of like practicing and teaching yoga? Like, where did it come from?
Well, I used to, like I mentioned in the beginning, whenever I first started doing yoga, I wanted to like beat the teacher. So I was really into like power yoga and all of the fancy postures and very specific alignment. And I just started to feel a little claustrophobic. Like it started to feel like my body wanted to keep moving. Like I didn't want to like stop right here. Like, I feel myself just wanting to kind of keep moving. So I just kind of leaned into that. And it was kind of a slow unwind. I've always had a bit of like a rebellious nature in a way. So that kind of still was showing up on the mat as well of like, well, what if I do it this way? What if I don't want to do it that way? So after following the rules for a while, I'm kind of like, well, I'm going to try this other thing. And I just feel like that it felt like it fit so much better.
Yeah.
So I just began exploring and realizing that, I wanted to move my body in different ways. And I was feeling boxed in by the typical yoga. Also beginning to realize that people have a certain view of yoga, and one of which is not very inclusive. Yeah. So I started teaching on YouTube a long time ago, pretty much right when I got sober, not long, within a year, I was teaching on YouTube. So a lot of feedback that I get from YouTube is that people don't go to classes because they don't feel like they fit there. Yeah. And that like breaks my fucking heart. Yeah. So I think that hearing from students and hearing from people really shifted that for me as well, of realizing that I need to make sure, I'm not seeing who I'm teaching to, but I know some of the things that they're feeling. And I wanted to start to be sure that they knew that they were welcome there. And so that also changed the way that I moved and the way that I spoke about moving. And then also just beginning to take, trauma-informed trainings, understanding the human condition is that we're all trying to feel like we're doing it right. We're all trying to feel like we fit. We're all trying to feel like we belong. And we need to not let yoga be another place where have all this criticism. It's like, can this be a place where we can just like sink in and relax? Like if you want to try to do it right, all the other areas of your life, like let this be a place where there isn't any right. And that's just as hard for me as it is for anyone else, because I like to do it right too.
Imagine that. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Right. I like to do it right. I really like to be right.
Yeah, me too. Too much. But it makes sense. It makes sense. And it's like what you're saying, access and people's comfort levels with the positions or their knowledge of yoga, or are they wearing the right things? Do they have the right body type? Like, it's a very cliquey, like you say, it's marketed to a very, very specific demographic. And that's why I loved at your retreat. It was just such a cool mix of people, and people were just moving in ways that felt good to them and wearing whatever they were wearing. It didn't look like a bunch of clones doing the same shit. It was like more like this exploratory with your own body, but also yoga, right? You're learning yoga, you're learning about the positions, you're learning about all these things. So I think too, I used to do poses that were hurting me. It didn't feel good to my knee. It didn't feel good to my back. It didn't feel good to my neck, but I did it anyways. And I held it, and I did it the way it was meant to be done because I wanted to do it right. Meanwhile, my body is like, this this is not good for you. Get out of this position, do something else. But I couldn't do it. I wouldn't get in child's pose. I wouldn't surrender. And that's crazy. I'm here to do something good for myself. And I'm sitting here like wrecking my knee because for my body, that position isn't right for me. Right. And in another class, I wouldn't feel comfortable to get out of the pose. But in your class, I would totally just, do whatever I wanted, or just change and shift if it didn't feel right. And you say that a lot in your instruction. You really encourage that to try different things and to, I don't know. It just feels very welcoming.
Yeah, I think we just have to be reminded. I have to be reminded. I'm reminding myself just as much as anybody else. It's like nature is to forget. And we have to be reminded. You can do whatever you want. Like, what do you want to do? Right. What feels good in this moment? It's not going to be what felt good yesterday. Like, I just think that's it's just important, and hopefully it goes off the mat. It's just it's a metaphorical mat, like really.
Yeah. Because in our culture, I think too, we push and push and push and push, even though we're tired and our body's telling us things. We just keep working and we keep doing this and we keep doing that. And I've done it before too, in weight training and other things where I've had injuries and my body's trying to give me a warning sign, and I just push because suck it up, you'll be fine, or it's crazy. That's crazy. And I see that now. But there was this connection of mind and body in yoga, which is why I get so emotional sometimes when I do yoga, because I'm connecting, and listening to my actual body. And that's not something I've done most of my life. So how has your experience revealed to you the ways that yoga is connected to our recovery and mental health, or movement in general? Like what, I know there's scientific things you could probably talk about, but how has it changed your mental health? Just being in movement all the time.
I've always been trying to kind of figure this out. And I think that there's many different components to it. In the beginning, I just thought it was magic. I was just like, it's just magic. I don't know why. And that's all it needed to be. It was just like, it's working. It doesn't matter why it's working. But I am too inquisitive for that. I think a big component of it for me, for yoga, specifically for vinyasa, the style that I teach, is that it really gets me into my breath. Like I actually don't think about my breath during the day. Most of us don't. I'm not thinking about this like always like inhaling, exhaling, but breath is so key. It changes everything about our system. It's wild. I'm doing some breath work trainings right now, and the breath is a superpower. That's really wild, but we don't utilize it in certain ways, or we don't regulate it. And it's not as rhythmic as it should be in our day-to-day lives. I notice I hold my breath a lot, especially if I'm feeling stressed or if I'm like in a lot of emails. I realize that I'm holding my breath. But in my yoga class, my body just like unwinds. And when I move up, I inhale. And when I move down, I exhale. And there's this natural rhythm. And my breath through my whole practice is like at a steady metronome. And I actually think that that's a massive component to it, is that I'm regulating my nervous system through my breath, and the movement reminds me how to breathe. Yeah. That's what is happening.
When in the opening of one of your practices, you say something like, it's good that we're moving, but more importantly, that we're breathing. Like you say something like that, like, yes, the movement's important, but the breath in terms of calming down your nervous system or whatever, that's paramount. And, is it the holiotropic? Because I saw a retreat you have coming up in Spain. Is that what that is? The breath work? Okay. Because I don't even know what that is. I've heard of Kundalini. Okay. I got to study it now.
Go look it up. It's powerful. And there's probably some stuff. One of my friends, Christine, who used to live in Austin, she's in the recovery community, who I'll be doing it with. She lives in Portland now, but she comes down to Austin and does some workshops, holotropic breathwork workshops. Rock your world. I did it first in treatment. So she was one of my therapists in treatment. She brought holotropic to my treatment center. And again, I think I told you, I was like, nothing's working for me. I ain't got no inner child. I don't want to be here. All of this. I was the director of the treatment center. Said that I was like for 3 months trying to throw a tiger into the water. She was like, you you. And I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. I was intense. But so we go into this thing of breath work, and it was going to be bullshit and whatever. I don't know what it was. And we like laid down and we breathed for 2 hours, and I was rocked my world. Paradigm shift.
Wow.
It helps you access some of your subconscious, and it just begins to come out and rewire. It's actually, I don't like to really compare it this way because we're not looking for a high, but it's fairly psychedelic in nature. It can be.
Yeah.
But it's just with your breath. And I think that was so big for me too. I always assigned power to other things outside of me to change the way that I feel. And that was the first time I was like, what was that? Like, who slipped me something?
That was my body.
Breathing.
Your own body. Yeah. Oh my God.
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And it's not always one of these poof experiences, but there's something that happens. There's always something that happens. And it's the subconscious being allowed to come out and to kind of do its, sort itself out. It's pretty amazing. I'm doing the training right now because I believe in its power. And this summer I'm working with Christine, the same lady who brought it to my treatment. We're working together now. After all of that, she was my therapist for many years. So it's quite a compliment to like work with your old therapist. I'm like, you know, all my shit.
Yeah.
She put up with me through so much stuff. Like I was just crazy. And, so all this years later, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm okay.
That's full circle. That's pretty awesome. No, I was looking at your retreats coming up and I was like, ooh, what is this? And I did a little bit of research, but obviously I need to read more. So you refer to Pema Chodron, Tara Brach, Kevin Griffin, so many of the greats in your resources, part of your recovery website that you kind of recommend to people, right? To like expand and think and read and whatever. It's probably hard to pick just one, but who's your most cherished spiritual teacher?
I would probably say Tara or Pema. Like that's whenever I'm in pain, whenever I'm hurting, I will either pick up a Pema book. So I have her more in books. And I'll just open a page.
Yeah.
And it's really medicinal. Or I'll listen, put on a Tara Brach podcast. And almost anyone I pick, it's just so, we live in this culture now where it's like something for this, especially being on YouTube. It's like yoga for wrists, yoga for bad days, yoga for something. And something about the Buddhism, it's like yoga for humans. Words for when you're human. And I can just open it up and it's like, So there's something about that inclusivity that Buddhism and especially these two teachers, lots of teachers, but these two teachers lay it on where it's applicable. And I find something that I need when I open up to them. Yeah.
I agree with Pema for sure. And that's really my first foray into Buddhism, I guess. And I think that I have that little yellow book of hers. It's just like a little yellow book and or When Things Fall Apart. But I started reading those things and it really resonated with me and didn't make me feel uncomfortable. But I will go read some Pema quotes sometimes when I just need to be soothed or to be reminded the Shinpa or whatever to not get hooked. And like, just so it's reminding, but it's real life, right? It doesn't sound like theory or theology necessarily. She's just so accessible. Okay. That's awesome.
And it's not big and flowery and it's not necessarily saying that everything's going to be okay.
Nope.
It's like, this hurts, doesn't it? And you're like, it does.
It does. Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging it. And that's what I love about her is her honesty, because it's like, this is what we are. We're people, we're humans. We have a lot of feelings. We suffer, and learn it, but like when
it's validating. Buddhism feels validating to be a human.
Yeah. Because you don't feel alone. And you know that nothing's wrong with you for feeling sad or feeling angry or craving things or wanting stuff or whatever. But the other thing is when people, I don't know how how many times you've been through grief or losing someone close to you or whatever, that people want to fix it. You know, people want to fix it. They want to tell you something, or they want to say something that is ridiculous and insensitive and makes it worse, because they want to make you feel better, you know? And sometimes you don't need to feel better. Like, you just need to feel sad. And that's what you're supposed to do when you lose someone that you love. Just be sad. I'm here for you if you need anything. I love you. That's it. That's all I ever want anyone to say to me. Not, you know, everything happens for a reason, or one of the shit people say to you when you're going through stuff. It's just like, are you serious?
Like,
so she's just like, yeah.
Like a PSA, loud, clear, put it on billboards, like fly it in planes, little smoke rings on the planes. Like, not everything for a reason. Like, no, stop it. Stop saying that.
and nobody, and it doesn't, you can't fix it, you know? And I don't want to try to fix someone else's pain either. I just want to be there with them or for them or whatever. So yeah, she's just like, wow, this really sucks, doesn't it? You're feeling terrible, huh? And you're like, yeah. Okay. So your bio, we're wrapping up here. Your bio says that you're a trauma-informed yoga teacher and addiction recovery educator. What does trauma-informed mean, first of all, for everybody else? Like, you hear it a lot, but like, what does it actually mean? And like, does it tie back to your own personal trauma as well?
So trauma-informed kind of means like I'm acknowledging, like I'm acknowledging trauma, and I'm informed about the way that it works in humans, what it does. And I'm aware that we've all experienced it in some way. And I try to teach in a way that is supportive for that. So like I try to, so for me, that might look like, it depends on the scenario. Sometimes if you were working with veterans or something, people with PTSD, you would teach in a very certain way, and you would be trained to teach trying to be aware of their triggers. You're never going to know what's going on with somebody, but you may let people know where the exit is. You may not move around the class as much. You may not use smells. There might be certain things that you would do for a certain population. In a general class, a trauma, you know what I mean? So it's trying to be aware of the trauma that's in the room. If you're working with sexual survivors, you might cue differently. You might not talk about the body as much. You might, you're trying to, it just depends on how you would kind of what area you're teaching in, but every class really should be trauma informed. Really, everybody should be trauma informed. And that's really just understanding the way that it works in the body, and knowing that we walk around with these nervous systems that are imprinted by our experience, and that we've all had challenge. And that it makes us act in certain ways or not act in certain ways. And it's kind of just giving permission for that to happen, and to know that we don't know. So it's a lot of different things. It's very fascinating, and it's very important, and it really, everything should be. I actually don't kind of like saying trauma-informed yoga teacher sometimes, because I'm like, we should all be trauma-informed. Like all of us. Shouldn't be special, but it's important. It's really important to understand the basics of, not specifics. You don't need to know all the specifics, but just the basics of like our humanity and how trauma affects the body.
Good. Thank you. Because I didn't know what it meant. Like, is it a certification? Is it like there's just because with each population, it's different. It has to be different, right? And so like, even nowadays, the language we use and things we used to say that we don't say anymore because it's offensive and it's insensitive, and this awareness around, or pronouns or understanding. But you're saying it's even more dialed in than that.
It can be, but it doesn't need to be. It can be. So if I was working in a certain place, then you can go and get trained to work in that certain place. Like if you want to work in, like I volunteered in prisons before. So I want to be like a little bit more clued in about like what's happening here. If I work in treatments, I'll teach a little bit differently. If I'm teaching with veterans, which I don't, but people do, I would teach a little bit differently. Being aware of the population, it can be that, or it can just be, there are definitely certifications, and it can also be there's trauma there. Definitely, I think that a training is very, very important. And I've taken trauma-informed trainings, but it can also be general of like, I know the way that trauma works, and that because we're interrelational beings, it affects all of us. And it allows us to be a little gentler and be a little bit more kind, I think, and just aware of like, maybe that person's not being an asshole. Maybe they are really dysregulated, or maybe they're triggered, or maybe they, it just allows us to look from a different lens.
I love that. I mean, in regular everyday life, like you said, it seems like we should all be at least at some level trauma informed. And when you're around people who have PTSD or veterans or there's a hypervigilance that might make you nervous or make you wonder what's going on. Like, well, I mean, there's a story there, right? There's a reason for that. And when you said telling people where the exit is, I would never even think of that, but it makes perfect sense, So like, and sometimes we can offend people or trigger, or, upset them or, like on accident, right? If you don't know, if you're not aware. Okay. I just wanted to understand what
we're going to be perfect. We don't know. No. It's all knowing that we don't know. It's like, there's 8 billion different experiences that are walking around the planet right now. So it's like,
And usually we don't know. That's the thing. If you're going to class and you're in a recovery center or a prison or this or that, like, the population somewhat, right? You can't paint with a broad brush, but you sort of know. Whereas in day-to-day life, we have no idea what's going on with people. We have no idea what their story is. Right. And so, so what is something that you're grateful for that only recovery would have allowed to happen in your life? Besides everything, but like one thing.
I'll say getting to reconnect with my mother. My addiction was, I don't know, maybe even harder for her than it was for me. She almost, didn't make it through. And that seemed like seemed pretty irreparable. And it wasn't. It was while I was still drinking. They essentially had to cut me off in the end. Like, my dad would take my calls, but mom couldn't talk to me anymore. It was like too painful.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. I'm glad you guys were able to restore, that relationship. Because when you were talking earlier about her telling you that when the phone rang, she assumed that it was a call saying that you were dead, or whatever. And my mom said something to me that was similar, toward the end. And, that's hard to hear. Because we're out there thinking, I'm fine. Nothing bad's going to happen to me.
I'm keeping it to myself.
I'm not hurting anyone but right. And meanwhile, they know the truth, and they know that it's likely that, they probably are going to get that phone call someday if we keep doing what we're doing. So I love that you got that back as a result of recovery. Okay. Final question. What's a golden nugget of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners today regarding their recovery adventure? For people who are in recovery, or maybe they're not yet, just because people who listen are like all over the map. So do you have a golden nugget for us?
I think I'm going to say two things. Okay. The one that I normally say, because I think is to leave room for possibility, because, oh man, we think we know, but if we don't, like this, I don't know mind, like have a little bit of, I don't know mind, because you have to leave space for what is new and what is truer forms of yourself, truer forms of what's possible. You have to leave space for that to come in. So I would have never wrote my story if someone had been like, what do you want? You can have anything you want. Like 9 years ago, I'm 9 years sober too. I would have sold myself short on like what was actually possible. I would have never believed it. So it's like leaving space for that to happen, and not needing to know, not to think you know. And the other thing, which has been just a mantra of mine of late, which I actually got from Noah Levine from Refuge Recovery when on his retreat. Yeah. We sat for a week in silence, and every so often he would say, this is what it is right now. And then like 3 hours later, he'd be like, this is what it is right now. And I'm like, damn, every time he said it, every time I said it, I'm like, you're right. This is what it is right now. Whether I'm like off in thought, or whether I'm like, this sucks, or whether I'm like, oh, I can do this, or whatever is happening. It's just like, this is what it is right now. And it's going to change.
That's so crazy.
And it's like, it's always appropriate and it's always helpful. This is what it is right now.
This is what it is right now. That's huge. That is huge because, like, when I meditate, I have many times pictured myself lifting the top of my head and looking inside, right? I'm an observer. I am not myself. I am not my thoughts. I'm not even with myself when I'm meditating. I feel like I'm observing. And I really I look in there and I'm like, holy shit, like what? There's so much going on in there. And it's not an instruction or anything like that. But it changes. It moves so quickly and it changes so often. And I think I used to make decisions based on thoughts that I thought were permanent, or feelings that I thought were permanent, or circumstances that I thought were permanent. I was making life-changing decisions based on very temporal things, right? And I didn't know that. Even to this day, if I get a sore throat, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick forever. Like, it's still my first instinct to think that if something shitty is going on, it's always going to be like that. And if something really great's going on, when is this going to get taken away from me? But that's how my brain works. But it's not true, right? Just because my brain thinks that doesn't make it true. So to hear you say this is what it is right now, like I'm gonna use that.
Dude, take it, please.
And also that open, curious, and we always think we know, or we want to think we know, because I feel safer when I think I know something for sure. And the fact is, I don't know shit. And I, you know, and like you said, look at your life that you're living. I mean, it's incredible. And you're helping other people too, on top of that. So I cannot thank you enough for joining and answering all these questions and sharing your story. And I'm going to be at another retreat.
Yes. Check
and
out.
I'm kind of scared of the breathing one, just because it sounds like very scary, like a lot of crying and inner child stuff.
Okay.
And I think having just lost that's the first time I've ever lost a parent. And so it feels very disorienting. I feel very unmoored. I'm remembering things from my childhood that I thought I had dealt with. And it's way more than him dying. It's a bunch of other stuff. And so of course I'm scared right now. I was scared to go do Reiki last week because I was like, oh, don't bring it out, but
super tender.
And I want to find out more about that breathing, because it sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, using discernment of, forward motion isn't always the best motion. It's like sometimes, where to be soft, where to push forward, but super tender space right now. And always asking what's the best way to take care of you.
Right. And it's moving out of the head space into the heart space. And that's a really hard thing for me, because I feel safer up here, even though it's crazy and dangerous in my head. I still feel safer here than I do here. And that tenderness, though, I have no choice now but to be tender. And it's kind of a gift. Even though it's horrible, it's actually, as with everything else, I've had to be forced into things that are good for me. So
Same. Well, we're also going to Thailand in November, and it's going to be
I saw that Northern
It's my
Thailand.
favorite venue in the world. Like my favorite venue. This would be my fourth retreat there. I haven't been back there in like 4 years, I think, pre-COVID, and it's pretty spectacular. So you got an option.
I'm going to be at one because I need a vacation, anyways.
Well, I'm actually going to jump off because I'm going to talk to my mom, because we talk now.
I love it. Thank you so much, Cole.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll see you soon. I appreciate your time. Have fun in Bali.
Ciao.
Okay. Bye.